Welcome to this video on Introduction to Music Fundamentals B. In this particular lesson, we are giving an introduction to triads. This is a very exciting part of your development where we start moving away just from writing down bits and pieces of music to actually working with harmony and chords. So it's a very exciting transition that we're making. Let's look at some terminology first. A triad is three notes that are played simultaneously. Tri for the three, and triad, the notes that are played all together. Just remember that a triad is three notes. We do get quartads and quintads and things like that. Quartads have got four notes played simultaneously, quintads, five notes simultaneously. But for the moment, in this year, we're only learning chords that are worth three notes, triads. Now, a chord is three or more notes played simultaneously. So a triad can also be referred to as a chord. But a quartad, which is four notes, is also a chord. A quintad is also a chord. All right. So triads are specifically for three notes played simultaneously. Chords are a more general term for several notes that are played simultaneously. I'll use both interchangeably for this particular module. Now, how do triads work? Triads and chords are often built up by piling thirds on top of each other. And let me try and explain what I mean by that. For example, if you want to build a triad on the note C, let's say you're working in C major scale, and you want to build a triad on the first note, on the tonic note. This is how you would build it. You'd start with C, then you'd go up a third, C, D, E. The second note of the triad would be E. And then if we want to build the next part of the triad, we'd go up a third again, E, F, G. So the triad would be C, E, G. Okay, they're going up in thirds, C, D, E, E, F, G. A third, another third. Okay. The root of a triad is the note of the scale degree upon which the triad is based. So we've been working with C as the root. And if we're working in C major, C is the tonic note. So the tonic triad is C, E, G. C, E, G. All right, now let's look at some terminology for triads. Take a look at your screen now. I've notated there for you the triad that we've just been working at. The bottom note is middle C, the second note is E, and the third note is G. Note that when we are writing a triad or a chord, all the notes come directly on top of each other. They are not spaced out next to each other, but directly on top of each other, in a straight line on top of each other. The bottom note of a triad is called the root. Okay, and we'll see just now in a few other videos' time how triads can be positioned in different positions. But for the moment, know that the bottom note is called the root. That is the note that we built the triad on. Remember, I started with a C, then I went up a third to E, then I went up a third to G. Okay, so the note that I start on, that I build the triad on, is called its root. Then because the second note is three notes higher, a third higher, we call it the third. All right, and the top note of the triad is called the fifth because it is five notes away from the root. Let's look at this again. Remember that the first note in the triad that we're working with is C, C, D, E, F, G. It's a fifth away from the root. So the bottom note is called root, the second note is called third, and the top note is called the fifth. But you'll also see in red on the left-hand side of the note that we are calling the bottom note the bass note. You'll see in videos that are coming up just now, in lessons to come, that the bass note is not always the root. But for the moment, the bass note is the bottom note of a triad. Now, how do we label triads? Now, there are different ways of labeling triads depending what kind of music you're working with. For the moment, I'm going to teach you the Western classical way of doing it, but you'll see in subsequent videos we'll also be working with how you do jazz labeling, for example. In fact, in this very video, we're going to look at some of the ways that you can label triads using a jazz method. But I'm going to start with the Western classical method. In previous videos, we've learned what the degrees of a scale are, and I've written them out for you there using Roman numerals. When we are labeling chords, we always use Roman numerals. So C, for example, is chord 1, or the tonic triad. 2, the second note is 2, chord 2, which is the supertonic. The third note is the mediant. The fourth note is the subdominant. The fifth note is the dominant. The sixth note is the submediant. The seventh note is the leading note. Now, if you want to make a triad on any of those, you simply say we're working with the mediant triad or chord 3. Okay, so that's how we are labeling the chords. We use Roman numerals and we call them by their technical names: tonic, supertonic, and so forth. Here are all the triads of C major written in the way that I showed you with the C triad. So you can see chord 1, or the tonic chord, is the one that we worked with right at the beginning of this video. Now, the supertonic triad, which starts on D, works in exactly the same way that we structured the tonic triad. It starts on D, we go up 3 notes, and we get D, E, F. That's the second note. And we go up a third from F, F, G, A. So we're working with D, F, A. If we do that on all of the notes of the scale, what you see on your screen now becomes a chord table, a table of chords, all of the chords in a particular key. What you may note is that the tonic chord, the first chord, is exactly the same as the last note, also the tonic chord. You'll see that the first one is C, E, G. The last one is also C, E, G. It's exactly the same as in a scale. The first note and the last note are both tonic. So it stands to reason that their triads are also exactly the same. When you are writing out a chord table, as you will do in subsequent time during this course, you don't have to write out the last one, the tonic triad, again. It's already at the beginning, so you only need to write out the 7 chords that you would be possibly working with. Let's have a look at the way that we would label these chords in jazz. Jazz takes a slightly different approach. It labels the chords by their roots, and it also gives us their quality. Now, chords and triads, just like intervals, have qualities, and we'll learn about that a little bit later. But this will make a bit more sense once we've done subsequent videos. For the moment, you can just see how it works. The first chord is C. It's built on a C, so we call it C. The second chord is built on a D. It's a minor chord, so it's called D minor. The third chord starts on an E, so it's E minor. The fourth chord starts on an F. It's F, then G, then A minor, B diminished, and we'll talk about the diminished chord later on again. Also, it's a different type of quality, and then C again. You might want to just make a note to yourself when you are using the Western classical version of labeling chords, they come underneath the triads. But when you're using jazz notation, they come on top of the triads. And this is mainly because people who are reading jazz notation usually just have a treble clef with the melody written on it, and then they're improvising the chords underneath. So they just need the melody to be written out and the chords above it. You may also, if you're a guitar player, be used to this kind of notation. All right, now let's have a look at the different types of triads that we're working with. There's several different types of triads. They're primary triads. And primary triads are the chords on the tonic, the dominant, and the subdominant. That's the first note, the fourth note, and the fifth note. Here they are. If we have a look at them, look at your screen now. You'll see I've put them in red: chord 1, chord 4, and chord 5. These chords are called primary triads because they perform primary functions in music. Now, if I was in class now with you on the piano, I would play for you a progression of 1, 4, 5, 1. Okay, so the chords going first 1, then to 4, then to 5, to 1. And you'd find when you listen to that, that it is the basis for a hang of a lot of music. It is the basis for quite a lot of pop music, for example, just those 4 chords. It's also the basis for quite a lot of Western classical music with variants in between, of course. And for hymn tunes that you sing at church, for songs that you sing at church, for all sorts of things that we are familiar with. That's how rooted it is in our ears. So those are called primary triads. Now, I just showed you the primary triads in a major key, but they work just as well in the minor key. Just important to note that when we are working with triads in the minor key, we are always going to use the harmonic minor scale. Remember now, when we're working with triads and chords, we are working with harmony. The notes are written on top of each other, not next to each other. So we are working with the harmonic minor scale rather than the melodic minor scale. Melodic is going this way, harmony is going this way. So please remember, always use the harmonic minor scale. That is the scale with the note 7 raised by a semitone. So I've written out for you, if you look at the screen, B minor. B minor has the key signature of F sharp and C sharp, but its 7th note, A sharp, is also raised. When you are writing out a chord table, it's very important that you add the A sharp in every chord that should have an A sharp. So let's have a look at what those might be. The 7th note, the raised 7th note, comes in the median chord, the dominant chord, and the leading note chord. And I've written them out there. In B minor, the 3rd note is B, C, D. Okay, so the chord starting on chord 3 is D, F sharp, A sharp. Many people forget to put the sharp in front of the A, and that causes problems. Chord 5 has the A in the middle, F, A, C, F sharp, A sharp, C sharp. And chord 7, the root of chord 7 is the A sharp, C sharp, E. Those are the chords which are affected by the raised 7th in a minor key. Now, if you have primary triads, you also have secondary triads. Secondary triads in the major and minor keys are chords on the supertonic, that's chord 2, the mediant, chord 3, and the submediant, chord 6. Here are the secondary triads in G major. You can see them there. Chord 2 is starting on an A, chord 3 is starting on a B, and chord 6 is starting on an E. And you can also see them in B minor. I've just put them underneath. If you look at the screen, same thing, chord 2, chord 3, and chord 6. Now, each of the secondary triads is related to a primary triad. Okay? They are relatives. Just like major and minor keys are related to each other, certain triads are related to each other. So chord 3 is related to chord 5. And if you look at them, if you put them right next to each other, chord 3 and chord 5, you'll notice that chord 3 shares 2 notes with chord 5. Okay, that's why they are related. They've got 2 of the 3 notes that they have are shared. So they're relatives. Chord 2 is related to chord 4. And if you put those 2 together, you'll see that they also share 2 notes with each other. And chord 6 is related to chord 1. Later on, you'll see that we can substitute, and actually you'll probably only learn this next year, you can substitute one of the secondary triads for the primary triads when you are harmonizing music. And that gives music just a little bit more spice and excitement. You'll remember just now that I said to you, if I played all of the primary triads together, it was the basis for a lot of music. But if you wanted to change that slightly so that it didn't sound exactly the same as all of the other music, you may decide to change one of the chords, let's say chord 4, and substitute chord 2 in its place. And that would give a slightly different take on the way that the harmony sounds. And that's where we end this particular video.